Welcome to Creative Mornings Oakland, everyone. My name is Yvonne Lima. I'm your host. So our theme, if you didn't know, is ink. And we got a great speaker lined up for this. So without further ado, I want to welcome our speaker up on stage. He's a legendary tattoo artist who's been doing this for ages now. If you didn't know, he actually designed the logo for Sons of Anarchy, and he actually made an appearance on there. So he's been tattooing out of Oakland, proud of it, in a time where nobody was opening shops. He opened Temple Tattoo, which is down the street on 17th. And he's been tattooing out of there along with Tattoo 13 and doing an amazing portfolio of work on all over town. Well, let me welcome up on stage tattoo artist, legend, dad, Freddy Corbin.
Start off with a little brief history on tattooing, and then I'll kind of talk about the business or how I got into it, shop, and then we could take it from there. I think tattooing is arguably maybe one of the oldest art forms. I have a little pet peeve about ink. Tattooers never really say the word ink. I think it's really great that they were given the word ink and then they were able to transfer that to tattooing. And we do use ink, but we also use pigments. Black is ink, it's from India, now China sometimes, and color is pigment. So we never say the word ink. We say tattoos, tattoo shop, this person has tattoos, he's a tattooer. We never say we're gonna go sling some ink, I'm gonna go to the ink shop or anything like that. So that's usually a sign that somebody that doesn't have anything to do with tattoos is involved. Like Miami Ink, Ink Master, things like that, you know? So if you see something like the Ink Well, you know there's no tattooers involved. Tattooing has a lot of roots that I think, need to be respected. We have forefathers in tattooing. Edison was actually the person that invented the first tattoo machine. He didn't intend it to be a tattoo machine, excuse me. He basically intended it to be a little machine that would poke dots in paper, and then they would put that paper up on a building and make like a big stencil to paint a word or a sign. And a man named Charlie Wagner, right around the turn of the 20th century, turned it into a tattoo machine. Pretty much merchant seamen and sailors are responsible for bringing tattooing to the West. It was indigenous to the Middle East, India, then eventually Japan, and then brought over to the West from merchant seamen and sailors. So I hear a lot of stereotypes and sometimes little judgment on sailor, quote unquote, sailor tattoos. And if it wasn't for those people, we probably wouldn't have tattooing in our culture. So one thing I'm really glad about is that tattooing is kind of a handcraft. I've seen in the last 10 or 15 years, people get into the business, now with the age of technology that we're in, it's kind of people are trying to just like the word ink, get their fingers in different kinds of creams or any kind of temporary tattoo or a website. Yelp is always at my ass about wanting to give them money to make me more popular. And, I thought it was a free service and, you're able to just basically go and look up and see what people wrote about your business, and that was it, and they keep calling me and bugging me. So that's something that I don't understand, But I get it. I get what's happening there, just like with the shows. I was always an artist as a kid, and it was kind of bleak to think about trying to make it as an artist back, when I was a teenager in the early 80s. And, it was I was a little bit, graphic arts was a little too conservative for me. It was a little linear. And making it as a painter seemed like it was something kind of impossible, probably hence the term starving artist. I had a girlfriend that had done a little hand poke tattoo of an Egyptian eye, on her side, and I just fell in love with that tattoo. I don't know what it was, but there was something about the permanence of it, the ethnicity of it. I just liked the way it looked, really. So I was just drawn to it, and I tattooed myself, and it was a very slow process, and I think I waited for like one of my first and only like tax returns. It's like $75 that I like saved and went down to like the tattoo shop to get my first tattoo, which was Lyle Tuttle's tattoo shop on 7th and Market, just in from Market near the old Greyhound bus station in San Francisco. And it was a beautiful shop. It was really beautiful. There was a tattoo museum. There was tons of art all over the place. There was people sitting there doing art and actually getting paid for the transaction. And I immediately realized, like, this I found my tribe. You know, like, this is what I want to do. I wanted to tattoo, like, as I was getting tattooed. And back then, it was a much harder business to get into. Now we have the internet. You can get on the internet. You can buy tattoo machines. You can buy pigment, ink, needles, whatever you need. We had to learn how to do all that stuff. We had to physically learn how to make needles. We had to learn how to mix the pigment. We had to learn about cross-contamination, sterilizing, all that stuff, you know, and it was very important. And the only way you could really do that was from another tattooer. There was no book on how to learn how to tattoo. You couldn't Google it. You couldn't do anything like that. So the only way to really learn how to tattoo was to apprentice. And I really, really dug that. I dug that there was something being handed down generation after generation. And I felt like I was part of something like really important, you know, something that had a lot of roots. I'm really proud of that. Basically, I just started getting tattooed by different tattooers until I was able to find somebody that was willing to teach me. And fortunately, by the third shop I kind of rolled into and was feeling out, it was a man named Erno Tattoo who owned a tattoo shop in the Fillmore back in the 80s. He was covered in tattoos by Ed Hardy. He had beautiful tattoos. And the neighborhood was just really exciting and stimulating back then. And you know, it just really turned me on. So I just stayed there. You know, I just kept going back and bringing him, you know, bottles of scotch, or he said he liked this, and I would bring it, and I'd go in and I would clean the place up and scrub the toilets, and eventually I got a key, and then it was like I worked a second job and eventually started tattooing, you know. And fortunately, punk rock was still around a little bit, and black tattoos were popular back then, so that really kind of worked for me. You know, that worked as far as having like a lot of friends that were willing to like get tattooed by me, and that, you know, helped me. And then you started kind of tattooing customers and stuff, and you always lied about like how long you had been tattooing and just kind of stayed within the realm of what you felt you could do. A couple years later, I was lucky enough to get asked to work for, Ed Hardy asked me to work for him while I was kind of getting tattooed by him. I remember coming across $300. And he was charging $200 an hour back in the 80s, and you had to like write him a letter, and he was living in Hawaii, and it was this really like neat thing. You know, it was very exclusive, and you weren't sure if you were even able to get in with him, and we just really hit it off. You know, it was really neat. I had a neat idea that he really liked, and we just kind of clicked. And the third time he worked on me, he asked me to work for him at Realistic Studio, and I was, you know, like more than flabbergasted to work for Ed Hardy and to even be asked. I've always said that if anybody deserves it, it's Ed. Ed has changed tattooing. He came out with the Tattoo Time in the 80s. There's about 5 editions. You can now buy it in a book form. And if anybody was going to get recognition or maybe rich off this business, then Ed deserves it. You know, I think a perception and a lot of reasons, the reason why a lot of people are tattooing these days is because it's almost a career choice this day, which is strange to me, you know. And I think there's a lot of younger tattooers. I'll use a little comparison. I think what happened with tattooing is basically what happened with the music industry probably in the 70s. You know, it went from like huge arena shows and big stadium rock shows and bands that were making millions of dollars to young people just kind of coming in and doing it for themselves, you know, which started like Sub Pop or all these other record labels. And then they eventually got popular, and it kind of just, you know, went from there. There were no rules for a while. You know, we had a code. There were ethics, and you had to apprentice, and that's how you had to get in. And then pretty soon, younger people started getting in. and they started like flashing a little bit of dough and teaching their friends how to tattoo and running around and buying hot rods and kind of showing off. And you know, and then more and more people wanted to tattoo. And then the piercing thing kind of came in. And then people who started piercing started to tattoo. And I have no judgments on anybody that wants to tattoo, because I meet people today and in the future, I'm sure, that deserve it as much as anybody else. You know, it's an integrity thing, just like being a musician, you know? So if your heart's in the right place and it's something that you really love, then I think you deserve to be able to do it. But I do think that you should kind of follow the code, you know? And part of that is knowing when to and when not to like tattoo somebody. So I'll kind of reel it in and go back to when I opened my shop and kind of a little bit how I think shops should kind of be run. I quit working for Ed in '96. I was over in Amsterdam. I was working over there a lot, and you know, I was just over there too long, and we had gotten to a little bickering thing, and it was just kind of time for me to go. And you know, I really, really respect the man, and we have a great relationship. But it was just time, you know. And so I wanted to figure out what I was going to do. There was already like 1 million tattooers tattooing in San Francisco that were really good. I said, you know, what if we opened a shop in Oakland? And the second he said that, it was just like this huge epiphany, this huge light bulb went off over my head. And it was just like, oh my God. You know, like everybody's over in San Francisco, everybody's trying to be in the city. You know, it was kind of a tattoo mecca, to be honest. A lot of tattooers, I would say probably 90% of the tattooers, 98% of the tattooers that work there are not from there. They move there to be around certain tattooers and be inspired and learn. So it was like, wow, there's, you know, like any business, you're supplying a market, you know, so there's like this huge market over here that, and also not only Oakland, but we have, you know, San Leandro, we have Hayward, we have Concord, we have all these like Walnut Creek, all these surrounding areas where these people don't have any place to go and get like a really, really good tattoo at that time. So I came over and I looked and I thought Ed Hardy had changed the world, you know, so I thought I could just come over here and get a place and it was going to be no problem. And it took me a long time, actually. It really took me like about a year to get open. You know, I had like a, you know, a little packet I would leave with landlords, and still they were just like, nope, 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 nope. It's interesting because it's kind of come full circle. You know, I see now that, you know, motorcycles have kind of come back into popularity, and some of the old designs that we used to make fun of, like the wizard holding the crystal ball with the energy coming off it, and all of that stuff is in vogue right now. People are getting unicorns and stuff. It's interesting, you know, it's just kind of like full circle, free for all. Kitschy stuff, you know, some people like stuff that's kind of kitschy. So the goal was basically to come over here and open a tattoo shop that was clean, that was beautiful, that people felt comfortable in, and they left happy. That's pretty much it. I'd been in a lot of tattoo shops before, in the 80s and the early 90s, where there weren't really a lot of tattoo shops around. Now there's a ton, and there's advertising, and there's Yelp, and there's things like that. So I think there's more of a need to cater to the clients. Before, it was a little bit gruff. You know, it was a little intimidating to kind of go into a tattoo shop. And, you know, they were somewhat a bit of a cowboy to get into that business and be able to hold it down. And it, you know, it did have, those stigmas did exist for a bit of a reason, you know? So I've seen people ask questions, you know, that were really legitimate, like, you know, extremely legitimate questions, and the tattooers would just kind of like shut them down or make them feel dumb or, you know, like, whatever, get out of here, we don't really care about you. And that, I never understood that, you know? I basically, I felt like these were good questions for people to be asking, and it didn't make any sense to me why they were belittled or made to feel dumb or stupid to be asking those questions. You know, this is like a permanent decision. This is on your body. This is for the rest of your life. So my goal was to make people feel really comfortable so they could come in and ask whatever question they wanted, and we would give them our answer, and they could decide to stay and either get tattooed or not. I wanted to be on Broadway. I had been living in the city, and I wanted to be on Broadway. I thought it was kind of like, oh, it's a main drag, and more people will see it. And it probably was the best thing that happened to me that we did not end up on Broadway, that we ended up just around the corner on 17th Street, which is just a few blocks away. And it's this beautiful tree-lined street. It kind of reminds me of Brooklyn a little bit. You know, it's got like the nice brick buildings and the old fire escapes that you still see. And the fellow who owns the building that I am in, his father owned that building, and there's just some really neat lineage there. I think part of being a good tattoo shop is embracing the community that you enter. It's not like a gentrification thing. It's not like, okay, we're going to come in and fix this up. You know, we're going to come in and we're just going to get to know the other people that live on the block, their businesses, and we're also going to patronize the local businesses, and our clients are going to patronize the local businesses, and we're all going to be friends, and we're just going to embrace the neighborhood and embrace the city. And that's what we did, and it's been working great ever since. We've been open about 17 years almost in a couple months. I've loved every minute of it. I love San Francisco. I think it's a magical city, but I haven't regretted moving over here 1 minute. You know, there hasn't been a minute that I've thought to myself, you know, God, it'd be nice to live in the city. And I just like the weather. It's flat. You know, it's just, I love the buildings. I love the lake. I just think it's beautiful. I lived near the lake for about 7 years, and I think it's great. You know, I just love the lake. I'll talk a little bit about things like Sailor Jerry rum. Sailor Jerry didn't drink. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke pot. He was pretty straight. And if he knew that there was rum out there with his name on it, he'd be rolling in his grave. You know, and there's all these, I've heard on NPR, you know, where Sailor Jerry rum will rent a tattoo shop or hire a tattoo shop in a bar across the street, and it's like you get a free shot of rum, and then you get to go over and get tattooed, and it's just this whole like ad campaign, and you know, I'm just not into that stuff. I think tattooing is a very personal thing. I think that it's something that means a lot, and I think that it's okay to get tattooed at whim. I think there's nothing wrong with a fun little friendship tattoo that you might share with somebody else or something on the fly. But I also think that it's something that you need to really, really think about because it is permanent. I know that because of the laser removals that's out there today, that I think some people might jump into it thinking like, well, if I don't like it, I could always get it removed. That's not really the case. I think that women should get tattooed differently than men. And I don't mean that in any kind of misogynist way. I just think that you need to think about your bodies overall when you're nude. I see a lot of people get tattooed, so it's like, hey, this shows when I'm dressed and I look kind of heavily tattooed. And I think you need to think about what you look like when you're naked, really, because that's your body and that's what it looks like, and you don't want a back piece ending like at your waist where your belt is. You want it kind of brought down on top part of your butt. You know, there's things like that that you need to think about. I think it's a really magical process as well. You know, there's really no way to explain why tattoos stay the way they do. Things usually migrate in the skin and sometimes leave your skin. They've never really been able to explain why you can get a tattoo as an image and 50 years later, it's still the same. You know, so there's something magical about that. The technology has changed a little bit. I'd say when people are getting tattooed around World War II era, I'll use that as an example, you'll see some of those guys and the tattoos are kind of blown out. That was large surges of electricity, basically putting in too much. Set my bottle down for a second. So you have basically your layer of your dermis, and you're inserting the pigment about halfway down with the needles. And they were putting it in at such a rate that it basically, you know, settled in the skin, and that's why the lines blew out and got really thick. So we have capacitors and things that regulate the electricity, and we have some more pigments now that we can use. So there's some more colors available. Originally, there was just basically black to begin with, and then they made brown, green, yellow, and red. And those were the colors that you saw in all tattoos. Sailor Jerry was actually the first person to ever invent purple, which was pretty incredible. You got to get a pin-up with a purple dress. You know what I mean? There was like purple, the fact that purple was involved in tattooing was like really, really a huge thing. I mean, now there's seafoam and burnt sienna and all this other stuff. And I kind of like a simpler palette. You know, I kind of stick with the 8-pack of Criollas, I think, you know, and then you use like white and get lighter and darker tones of different colors with black and white. I think it's good. You got to be careful what pigments you use. You know, there's a lot of companies now that are just really trying to knock out equipment to sell. They're using things like butane to break down the pigment. You can have a reaction to that. You know, like I said before, we had to learn how to make needles. We had to learn how to make pigment. All that stuff can just be ordered on the internet now, and there is certain issues with some of the pigment out there and stuff, so you got to be careful. One thing that I would really strongly recommend if anybody's interested in getting tattooed is that they basically look at photos of the person's work that they're going to get tattooed by. There's lots of really, really good tattooers out there, and there's lots of different styles. You know, so you can have somebody that might be really good at doing like sacred geometry, but they might not be good at doing a traditional tattoo, or they might be really good at doing black and gray in a portrait, so just find, you know, I would say go to different tattoo shops, go to a few, see what the vibe is, see if you like the people that you talk to, look at photos of their work, ask them a few questions about maybe what they use, if it's single service or if it's not. Not everything has to be single service. And just go with your gut, really. You know, that's my advice if you're in search of a good tattoo, is to basically, there are a lot of really incredible tattooers in the Bay Area. So if you live here, you're in a great place to get tattooed, and good luck with that. I'll leave it there. Thank you.